Good day and welcome to our UTS course. And today we'll be learning about how to take care and take charge of our own health. As students and also professionals in the future, it is necessary for us to gain control and to also manage our own health. So, for today's lesson, we have the following intended learning outcomes. So, at the end of the lesson, we should be able to first explain how things or how taking responsibility for personal health promotes well being. Second, identifying the different ways on how to eliminate different types of stressors. And lastly, we are to also explain what is self care. So let's begin. Now, in taking care of ourselves, the medical professionals often encourage us to avoid stress in order to stay healthy because stress somehow triggers life threatening illnesses such as cancer, hypertension, heart attack, high blood pressure, and many others. And stress also causes an individual to make hasty and risky decisions, making the person impulsive. And also, drastic actions, whether physical or verbal, may also arise. And stress, therefore, we could somehow conclude that it has a lot of negative consequences. Now, talking about stress, there is a need for a high level of patience and emotional quotients in order to deal with everyday stressors. Solution driven perspective and blame free attitude, accompanied by positive outlook in life, are some of the ways to maintain our well being. Now, let's move to the three domains that dominate the self. Based on the domains of biorhythm, the self is dominated by three domains that operate in a cycle. These domains manifest regularly, and one may dominate the other. These domains are the physical, intellectual, and the emotional domains. The physical domain includes coordination, strength, and well being. The intellectual domain includes alertness, analytical functioning, logical analysis, memory or recall, and communication. Now, thirdly, the emotional domain includes creativity, sensitivity, mood, perceptions, and awareness. Taken as a whole and as a framework or indicator of health, these domains must be balanced by individuals. Based on this framework, any imbalance results in incongruence and thus in an unhealthy condition. Contemporary medicine prescribes that in order to be healthy, one must regularly exercise, control the intake of unhealthy food, and be in a forgiving mode so as not to poison one's mind. If there is a physiological poison, there is also a psychological poison. In its entirety, such negativity on all domains opens the possibility of occurrence of sickness or a disease. And to avoid sickness or disease, a positive and proactive score in these domains leads to a healthier life. And there is also a reason why physical education is taught at a very young age. There is a reason why there is a need to educate the youth as early as possible. For most, there is a compelling reason why individuals need to know themselves. Maintaining a healthy lifestyle is a choice. Suffice it to say that being physically active, intellectually hungry, and emotionally stable is healthy. This mindset leads to a healthier life and a happier perspective in life. Now, moving on to personal health responsibility. Steinbrook in 2006 stated that today, more than ever, personal health responsibility or taking charge of one's own health is an essential step in disease prevention as well as in protocols for healing and recovery from diseases. Now, you may ask, what is personal health responsibility? Now, it is actually the active participation in one's health and healing plan through education and lifestyle changes. Although the concept of personal health responsibility seems to be simple, it is often overlooked when people are diagnosed with an autoimmune disorder and seeking for a quick fix. One needs to be sensitive about the importance of good health, exercising every day, avoiding alcohol, tobacco, and illegal drugs, maintaining proper hygiene, having enough rest and sleep, eating on time, and ensuring a balanced diet are a few things that one can do for the body. People should think more about the prevention of diseases than the cure of these. Diseases may be avoided if everyone is conscious about what one does, since most diseases are acquired as a product of unhealthy lifestyle. Part of the personal health responsibility is knowing one's family history. This is one way to determine hereditary illnesses, which can be avoided in the future. Examples are diabetes and high blood pressure, which may be inherited from parents. Another health responsibility is conducting research on effective herbal medicines and food supplements, which are now very popular and available in the market. Prescription drugs manufactured in the laboratory are made up of chemicals, which can be detrimental to people's health. Now, in the Philippines, several measures have been enacted to instill health awareness and encourage personal health responsibility, like anti smoking campaigns, discouragement to take medicines without prescription, encouragement to seek medical assistance and services from licensed physicians, heavier penalty for people caught selling drugs for abortion, and many others. Now let's move forward to the topic about stress. Now, stress is defined as the reaction of our physiological and psychological self to any kind of demand or threat. In some textbooks, stress is referred to as the mismatch between the resources of the person and the demands present in the environment, meaning we only have one body to respond to a lot of demands coming from our environment, and also relating to the roles that we play in the kind of family and community that we have. Now, right off the bat, one could already claim that not all stress is negative or unwanted. Sometimes there are positive stresses that are aptly called eustress. Eustress is a beneficial stress that can be in the form of physical, psychological, and biological stimuli. Literally, the Greek prefix eu means good. Hence, the word eustress means good stress. Now, examples of eustress include a promotion from a job, transferring to a new home, or children moving out after they have finally gotten married. And to simply put, the eustress or these stresses are likely to be good problems or happy problems. Now, moving to the bad stress or distress, it is actually the exact opposite of eustress. Distress occurs when there is a tension buildup which becomes unbearable and difficult to cope with, just like natural calamities and man made disasters. Now, let's talk about some concepts related to stress. A stressor is any event that compels a person to adjust or to change. The following are the common stressors that are described as unpleasant and life threatening. Just like, for example, catastrophic events and life threatening experiences. They are abrupt, unforeseen experiences of traumas, such as natural calamities, military combats, terrorist attacks, incidents relating to accidents, and physical and sexual abuses. Life changes and strains, like, for example, separation of parents, illness in the family, change of work or change of workplace, transfer of domicile, and other circumstances that demand people to adjust. Chronic problems are also included and classified as stressors. They exist for long period, which include circumstances such as suffering from a serious illness, having irresponsible neighbors, and failure to acquire a lucrative or high income job. Everyday hassles are also included to be part of the classification under a stressor, or they are also called as stressors. They could be everyday irritations, sources of irritations, pressures, and annoyances that may not be significant stressors by themselves, but whose cumulative effect can be significant. Like, examples are in the Philippines, traffic congestion, or waiting in a long line to get a taxi, or just a bad day when everything goes wrong. Now, another important component of stress is what we call a stress tolerance. This refers to the ability of the individual to endure stress. An individual's stress tolerance is dependent on his or her psychological and physiological constitution. Thus, everyone reacts differently to stress. One's perception of stress is subjective, meaning some people, when they are faced with pressures or stresses, they are likely to say that they can cope with it and they are positive and hoping that they can be able to finish their tasks, and they are likely to be challenged that they are given pressures or they are experiencing stress. But on the other end, some people might actually have a negative perception over stress, that they cannot be able to survive the day. Like, taken for one, a eustress for someone could be a distress to another. But in the reality, one cannot really eliminate stress, but one can manage it. Now, when can we say that a person is likely to also manage stress poorly? Now, there are several symptoms that may be observed from people under stress. Symptoms can be physical, behavioral, or emotional. Physical symptoms are characterized by one's inability to sleep, fatigue, headache, cramps, unpleasant aura, and gastrointestinal problems. Stress also causes aging and malignant diseases like cancer. Emotional and behavioral symptoms include lack of concentration, irritation, nervousness, panic, lack of appetite in food or too much intake of food, low level of enthusiasm and desire, and also mood swings. Now, some people who are unable to properly manage stress are vulnerable to unhealthy habits like drug addiction, alcoholism, cigarette smoking, or poor diet. When these unhealthy habits persist, those people are led to undesirable behaviors and even mental health conditions. Since we were talking about stress, let's now talk about how to cope with them. Now, People who have adequate coping resources and methods will suffer fewer effects of stressors compared to those who lack them. In dealing with stressful experiences, people may use coping resources, which include money and time. Now, in relation to this, those individuals who are financially disadvantaged and those who have limited or no time due to work schedule have lesser chance of eliminating the conditions that stresses them. The effect of stressors can also be eliminated through the use of effective coping methods. Most of these methods can be classified as problem focused or emotion focused, according to Bernstein, Penner, Clark Stewart, Roy in 2012, Coating Folkman in 1986. Now, problem focused coping method involves an attempt to change or eliminate sources of stress. And examples of this coping method are confrontation, seeking social support, and undertaking careful and deliberate problem solving. So, this is like addressing the problem itself through talking it out, confronting someone who has hurt you or has deserted you, looking for people who can support you socially, and also undertaking careful and deliberate problem solving. Now, moving forward to emotion focused coping method, it is actually a method which is aimed at controlling the negative emotional consequences of stressors. Just like, for example, self control, keeping your feelings to yourself. Or it could also be using distancing, not thinking about the stressor. You are tending to avoid these stressors more than it could also consume you and your energies. Accepting responsibility, like attributing the stress as one's creation, and also having that wishful thinking as if things and situations will just pass or come to pass. Now, let's move forward to the social and cultural dimensions of stress. Culturally and socially, stress is typically viewed negatively. Recent research, however, revealed that stress is a neutral concept. What was originally seen as a negative factor can now be viewed otherwise. Similar to existential philosophy, stress is considered to be relative. One's perception of stress depends on the perspective of the individual. This perception is always subject to change. What is viewed as an asset can be viewed as a liability later by another person. A typhoon could be a menace to some, but for a rain starved locality, it could be a blessing. Now, in the Philippines, there are perennial stressors that frustrate most people. Some of these are the public transportation and traffic problems, frequent increase in prices of basic commodities and services, just like our electricity and our water bills, and also unfinished projects like the drainage system, our roads that cause further traffic congestion and also put people at risk. Now, moving forward, let's talk about the need for self care and self compassion. Now, they say that you can't give to others what you don't have. Psychologically, before you could take care of other people, you must take care of yourself first. And before you can give something yourself, you must first be in touch with the different aspects of yourself. Philosophically and psychologically speaking, a selfless individual does not exist. A simple analogy would yield that there is always something for someone, and there is always an intrinsic motivation and rationale why a particular deed is done. And there is always a reward or a retribution for the individual. One must first take care of himself or herself before he or she can take care of others. While it is noble to think of others before oneself, reality pushes one to think of himself or herself first before others. Now, self care refers to all activities that a person does to maintain and improve his or her physical, psychological, emotional, social, and spiritual well being. It has five dimensions, namely the physical, psychological, emotional, social, and spiritual self care. Now, physical self care, which could be easily understood through its name, it includes all the activities that one does to maintain and improve his or her physical well being, like consistently sleeping for at least 8 hours, drinking 8 glasses of water, eating healthy and nutritious foods, taking vitamins, and exercising. Now, the second dimension of self care is the psychological self care, which includes all the activities one does to deal or resolve mental health issues, address both positive and negative emotions, and learn to deal with negative self talk or self criticism. Now, moving forward to the emotional self care, which is also the third dimension of self care, it includes all the activities that one does to cope with stress and deal with grief. Now, the fourth dimension is social self care. It includes all the activities one does to connect with people valuable to him or her, and it means spending time and having a great time with loved ones and other valuable people, including family, friends, neighbors, schoolmates, professional organizations, and many more. Now, lastly, the last dimension is the spiritual self care, which includes all the activities one does to strengthen one's relationship with his or her beliefs. It is also included that meditation and contemplation about one's purpose of existence is also part of the spiritual self care. Now, what are the benefits of self care? These are the following: enhanced productivity, and it is also shown when a person distances himself or herself from vices like drinking liquor, smoking, gambling. He or she will have more time to focus on his or her goals in addition to improving his or her physical well being. Second is improved vitality. These are also shown through physical care activities like exercising, eating the right food, drinking enough water, and getting enough sleep. This could actually increase the resistance to diseases, and unhealthy habits make a person vulnerable to diseases. Third benefit is also it enhances self esteem. Avoiding self berating is very important. Negative self talk is damaging to how one perceives himself or herself and may lead to anxiety and stress. It is important to it is important for a person to discover and accept who he or she really is and be proud about himself or herself. Now, the fourth benefit of self care is also increased self knowledge. After a person discovers and accepts who he is or she is, it is important for him or her to know what he or she wants and what he or she loves to do. With this, one will be able to live life to the fullest, according to the purpose he or she has. Now, the fifth one is mindfulness and compassion. Knowing and being good to oneself stems from goodness and compassion one directs towards other people. And since we have mentioned about self compassion, now let's talk about it. As Whitney Houston's famous song goes, learning to love yourself is the greatest love of all. This line reminds people to love themselves first. In the Roman Catholic belief, one's body is created in the image of the likeness of God, and the body is owned by God. And therefore, there is no reason for self berating. self recrimination, self hatred, or self flagellation. Other religions also believe that one has no right over his or her body, for the body is believed that it is governed by a higher being. However, whatever belief one has, he or she has to be kind to himself or herself and accept who he or she is. One needs to have self compassion, which is basically showing compassion to oneself. It involves being open to and moved by one's suffering, expressing care and kindness towards oneself, taking an understanding and non judgmental attitude towards one's inadequacies and failures, and also recognizing that one's own experience is part of the common human experience, according to Neff in 2018. Now, some people would perceive themselves as stupid or as fools because of certain actions or decisions they have made. This act of self recrimination ruins one's self esteem and is also a sign of lack of self respect. Humans are imperfect beings. No one is perfect, and they should positively take challenges in life as well as the wrong choices and decisions that made them hope. And these should be made with hope, improving themselves so as not to also commit the same mistakes twice. Now, self compassion has three components. Now, what are these? Self compassion has self kindness, meaning not being physically and verbally harsh to oneself. Self-beration is a kind of verbal abuse directed to oneself. It involves an act where one blames himself or herself for his or her actions or decisions. Usually, this is done by stating unkind words to oneself. And on the other hand, self-harm is the act of harming oneself through physical means, which is both physically and psychologically damaging to an individual. Now, the second component of self compassion is also common humanity. It means that there is acceptance of one being an imperfect being. One makes mistakes along with everyone else, just like many other people who have committed a lot of mistakes. And one does not always get what he or she wants in life. Now, third component and last component is mindfulness. This is the practice of being fully present in the moment. One has to turn toward his or her painful thoughts and emotions in order to embrace himself or herself with compassion.